Welcome to a tiny little bonus episode of Between Pages and Friends, a book club podcast hosted by Con and Lauren, two besties who read a lot of books, and John and Kyle, their supportive gamer husbands who have agreed to read with them. I'm John.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Lauren.
And I'm Con. Welcome to our Throne of Glass book club. In this special bonus episode, we are discussing the final 2 bonus chapters for the Throne of Glass series written by Sarah J. Maas. There are 6 bonus chapters for the whole series, but today we are just discussing the final 2, which were originally printed in special editions of Empire of Storms. One is an Aelin POV chapter that takes place before Empire of Storms, and one is a Chaol POV chapter that takes place before Tower of Dawn. These can both be read after Queen of Shadows because they take place before the events of the tandem read. However, because we are reading them after completing the tandem read, we may be discussing tandem read spoilers in this episode, but there will be no spoilers for Kingdom of Ash here today.
Yes, and if you're tuning in for the first time, hey, we're usually not wearing Halloween costumes. If you want to know why, go listen to the beginning of episode 24 real quick and come right back. And stop starting podcasts at the most recent episode. You got to go to the beginning with these things. You're missing out on context. But we're glad you're here. In our regular weekly episodes, the 4 of us are currently covering the entire Throne of Glass series in a book club format. Each episode features a pronunciation guide based on the audiobooks, crazy chapter recaps, a detailed discussion of the chapter section, followed by thoughts and theories from our first-time readers. That's me and Lauren. We also have an official cry count going for the 4 of us, and Lauren is in first place.
Yep, that's me. Champion of crying over fictional characters. It's fine. If you'd like to discuss or cry about each of these episodes with us, as well as get connected with a whole community of other like-minded book lovers, you should join our Patreon. It's a monthly membership that gives you access to our lovely Discord community, live events, merch discounts, and way more. There is a $5 tier and a $10 tier that you can check out on Patreon if you'd like to join or support the show.
Lastly, before we dive into these bonus chapters, one very important, very free way you can support the show is by sharing with a friend or writing a review, or both. Both is better. We sincerely appreciate your kind words and excitement over sharing this podcast with your book besties.
And now, let's dive into these bonus chapters. We'll start with the Aelin chapter from Barnes & Noble, exclusive edition of Empire Storms. In this chapter, Aelin and co. have just crossed the border into Terrasen 2 days ago and have to stop at a small town to get supplies. In town, they meet a young girl with water magic, along with some townspeople who are highly skeptical of the crew. Aelin shows the girl her own water magic and tells her to come to Orinth when she's older to be trained by Selena Sardothian.
Yeah, so one of the first things that happens is it's just like the crew talking about what should we do. We should go into the little town. And one of the people there is Evangeline. And I kind of forgot she exists. We haven't seen her since like the very beginning of Empire of Storms. If I had read this before the books, I think it would have been like normal. But I was like, oh yeah, Evangeline, you're a person. I hope you're doing good, girl. Like, hope to see you soon.
Oh
my bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while. It's been a while since we've seen Evangeline. But you even brought it up a couple episodes ago, I think, where you were like, I wonder how Evangeline's doing. I hope we get to see her soon.
Yeah. Well, I think hopefully the group's headed back and they can run into her. I don't know.
Yeah. So you can technically read both of these chapters before the tandem read. But when I was putting the schedule together, I had never read these bonus chapters before. Like, I wanted to save it for this experience because I didn't read them on my first read. I was trying to refrain from actually reading them, and I had seen someone else say to wait until you were done. So that's why we're doing it here. But yeah, I think with that, Rowan mentioning in this chapter his cousins, Enda and Celine, by name and explaining his estranged relationships with them kind of adds some more context and like big foreshadowing, I feel like, for Empire of Storms, for him seeing them later. And he does mention them by name again because he goes to both of them specifically and then all of his other cousins. But that was kind of I felt like that was kind of a big thing to put in this bonus chapter.
Yeah, in the Empire of Storms part, it just kind of felt like, oh, dang, he's got a lot of cousins. And I mean, he's old, so I guess, yeah, he's lived life with them. But like getting this whole little backstory of Rowan, obviously gives a little more character to him, but also to that moment with his cousins and stuff, knowing that the last time they saw each other, they were either goofing off at their uncle's house or he was blowing them off because he was so heartbroken over his love dying and stuff. So that whole moment just, I felt like it had more depth to it.
I had opposite reaction, and I've had this before with some bonus chapters where I'm like, we've read the whole book. We have to go all the way back to the beginning. And granted, this bonus chapter was left out because it doesn't really change the story at all. But to me, it's just like, if I read this at the beginning, I might have had a bigger reaction when he talked to them again. But now going back just to hear him say he has cousins, I'm like, yeah, I know.
Well, yeah, but we're
cousins.
talking about it in reverse. Like, oh, that would have been nice to know because like we get.
Yeah, would have been nice to know.
Well, and usually in a special edition, the bonus chapter is at the very end. So I feel like if it's a book I've never read before, I probably wouldn't just read the bonus chapter first. Like, it's kind of just supposed to add some extra context, I guess, would have been the point of these.
Some of the books that, like, obviously enjoying this series, but there are other books that I would die over for that book. And so getting any scrap of information more from the author in that world, I live for. And so there are some times that the chapter's like, oh, I didn't learn anything else, but that was so fun to live with the characters a little bit more in a new way or whatever. And so there are going to be people who just want literally anything about these characters, and that's going to be this for them. And it's okay that it's not for you, but other people living their best life today.
Well, some of the bonus content I found out too is just like little glimpses of Sarah's notes, like her edits of a specific chapter or something, like stuff that she wrote in the margins on a chapter, like when they were doing editing rounds and stuff like that. There are things that she switched around, like stuff like that was released as bonus content for Kingdom of Ash. It's not enough to do a whole episode on, but little scraps.
And people eat it up.
Yeah. I really loved, though, the description of this girl's intricate water magic in this bonus chapter, because that's not something we get a lot of. We don't really know any water wielders in the actual books. And so I love the description of her magic and like the water butterfly and that it followed Aelin a half mile out of town. Like that was just really cute and a really cool way to describe it.
Aelin drops like a gold coin in the girl's pocket or whatever. And then it says she didn't even tell her, like, did the girl even know, kind of a thing. And so then it was like when the butterfly shows up a half mile out of town, I was like, I wonder if she just found the little gold coin and was like, thank you. And like sends her little butterfly. Which cute. I thought was really cute. But also just shows how powerful she is that she can do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. The range is really cool. Yeah, I mean, overall, like, as sad as it is, I did kind of like getting this glimpse into the current state of Terracin and like the kind of mistrust the people have, you know, that are still residing there and what that day-to-day life looks like for the people in the towns that are still remaining. It was some interesting, like, added context to that.
Yeah, and I think it gives us a new character and maybe some hope of seeing this character again. So is it Phaedra? Is that how you would pronounce that?
That's what I'm assuming, but again, there's no audiobook for these. So.
We didn't get a pronunciation guide. Just kidding.
I think it's Peter.
Pedre. No, I hope we see Phaedra again because Aelin told her to come find Selena Sardothian in, I think, about a year's time to head to Orinth. So that would be really fun if we get to see Phaedra again. And then during the whole part of this chapter, Evangeline kept trying to convince Lysandra to switch into a squirrel so she could make her like a crown or whatever. And so it ends with like Sandra actually doing that and staying as a squirrel for several days so that Evangeline could make her like a little crown, which is just really cute. And I love that for them.
I wish I had an acorn hat for my Lysandra costume now.
Yeah. It's true.
And that brings us to the Empire of Storms bonus chapter on Chaol. This is from the W.H. Smith exclusive edition of Empire of Storms, and this chapter details a glimpse into Chaol and Nezrin's journey across the sea to the southern continent before the Tower of Dawn begins.
My first note is just that Chaol describes himself stuck laying on the deck like a flopping fish in the sun. And I just can't with these fish comparisons. This is like the third time. I did think this was really interesting from Chaol. He is talking to Nezrin, and she's asking him like if he's over Aelin, basically, or if he's holding out hope for like a future with her or something. He says, am I supposed to lie in bed and weep over it, that I was not the man she wanted? Am I supposed to mourn the fact that the dreams I had, the plans I made, were all for a woman who did not exist? Loving an assassin with no responsibilities is completely different from loving a queen with a kingdom and a world to look after. Would I have loved her if I had known from the start what she is? He shook his head. If I had met her now, ... my first instinct would have been to protect Dorian from her. I feel like this would have been helpful for him to say in the actual book. Like earlier,
Sure.
you know, but I appreciate him coming to this revelation. It was just, this felt like such a clear way to like sum up kind of his feelings of having to move on from their relationship over the course of the last couple books.
I feel the same about this bonus chapter, but in a different way. It's sort of weird. I agree with why it was left out, but because it had good information that would have changed the book. Because, like, I just continue on from where you left off, where it says Selena was a fraction of Aelin, both good and bad. But Aelin, she is Selena, and she is queen, and she is Firebringer. I fell in love with a facet, and I panicked when I realized it was a fraction of the whole. When I saw that power, that heritage, and it was not a part of my plans. Rowan Whitethorn saw everything from the moment he met her. He saw all of Aelin, and he was not afraid. I don't blame either of them for falling in love, and I don't blame her. And I just wrote, this being a bonus chapter is why so many people hate Chaol. There is a fuller realization here than what we receive in the main books. Like, he goes so much further in depth here, and it shows that Chaol understands they weren't right for each other. Insert another rant about Aelin hiding information because she's the cause of her friends being hurt. But did Chaol react well? Still no. I'd like to see someone who has their entire worldview upheaved from beneath them by the one they've grown to love, leading them to spiral into self-doubt about their entire life, leading to that point. But still, that doesn't change the fact that he said mean things. However, this and the rest of Tower of Dawn show so much growth, I can't stand people not standing for him. But because it's a bonus chapter, that's why so many people still hate on him. But it's a bonus chapter because if we saw this growth at the beginning, the rest of Tower of Dawn would have not made sense, because we would have been like, you already said all this at the beginning. You're already moving past it.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning of Tower of Dawn, we were stuck with real depressed, not moving forward Chaol. This makes it sound like he's already moved forward. So it wouldn't have made sense for him to regress when he got to the
I think he wasn't depressed necessarily over Aelin. It was just like his own body.
Yeah. But still, like, that was still part of the cause of it, was his sadness over everything that had happened to him, and not understanding it in a healthy way was also what kept him back from healing, because the Vogue was feeding off of it.
Yeah, and there is that moment of realization that he has toward the end, like in that chapter 55, where they're in the darkness together. And a lot of it is about Aelin and Rowan.
Yeah.
So I could see that. Like, I know this wasn't the whole of the healing that he needed to kind of experience, but yeah, this was like such a well-rounded like thought from him that we don't get in the books. So I did appreciate hearing that from him, but it was almost kind of jarring that it was all packed into this bonus chapter, because then there's even some stuff later on that is in the actual books, either that's reiterated later or like that. It is interesting.
Right. And that he says all this here and other things to Nezrin that he's just all of a sudden not willing to talk about when they get there. It wouldn't have made sense.
True. But just like the exclamation mark on all of that he just said and needed to have said the whole time was just, I was what Selena needed after Endovir, but Rowan is who Aelin needs forever. So
Preach.
good. Sums it up.
All right. I got beef with Sarah.
Oh.
I got beef because Nezrin tells Chaol here, I hold you to no promises. I expect nothing. Exactly what she wrote in her note. And I'm like, so Sarah, you wrote these before Tower of Dawn, but you made her and Chaol go through this dance for like half of the book.
That's true.
When this expectation or lack thereof was between them, like already. Because this is what she meant. It's the same thing that she meant from later in the book. It's another one of those things where it's like the author, because she had to have that plot line kind of in the book, that like tension, she had to have that for like the first half of the book kind of between them.
Yeah. I feel like if I would have read this before, I would have been really annoyed by that the whole entire time. Because we have that moment where I'm annoyed at Chaol for that. Like, she says that in her note. And we get
Right.
the however many times after that he and Irene are kind of flirty that he's like, oh, but I can't because I'm loyal, blah, blah, blah. And I was annoyed by that. But it was only a couple times, like for that little tiny bit. I think I would have been annoyed for a very long time if I had read that at the beginning.
It makes sense in that case because she like wrote him a note saying that, so they can't like talk about it.
Yeah.
Sure.
But they like have a discussion here
Yeah.
after her saying that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what are we doing?
Mhm.
You know, what are we doing here?
How much of it, though, do you think is because this is a bonus chapter? Do you think it was like she wrote this and then started writing Tower of Dawn and then realized like, okay, I don't actually want what I wrote earlier in my book, so cut it out. But then was like, I'll still use those lines later.
why not?
And then having later
that's
released
very
this as a
possible.
bonus chapter, been like,
John and I talked about this a little bit. Like this bonus chapter, even though it's before Tower of Dawn, it wasn't released with Tower of Dawn. It was released with Empire of Storms, which came out first. So they did come out like really close together. She was cranking out like one a year. So she may have started Tower of Dawn already.
She could get back on that.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, she may have at least already had, I'm sure she at least already had an outline for it. But since this was released so far in advance, like before Tower of Dawn came out, that definitely could have been the case.
I feel like everyone's had their turn at a word or something, a phrase that has bothered them for some reason, but I don't feel like I've had very many of those, or if any. But this one really got me for some reason, where Irene takes her water and it said she slugged from the glass of water. Am I only one who thinks it's weird, the use of the word slugged? That's a weird way to just say she took a drink. She slugged
You've never seen a
from
slug
glass
drink?
of water. I'm not a fan. That's weird.
Definitely interesting.
That's the whole note. I'm just weirded out by that.
Oh my gosh. I guess I didn't really think anything of it when I read that, but so I was typing these notes like into the outline as I was reading the chapter, and I had stopped here to say, okay, I feel like I definitely would have appreciated seeing this whole conversation between Nezrin and Chaol before Tower of Dawn. But now that we're talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I feel like after finishing the whole chapter, I think I probably would have been kind of annoyed to read this first.
Yeah, I'm totally there. He and Nezrin having a conversation and they end up making out, which shout out to them. Live your best life. She like straddles him. They're having this whole moment, all the things. And then Chaol starts being Chaol and starts thinking about all the dumb things. But like in the middle of making out with Nezrin, he starts thinking about the broom closet with Selena. What? Like, I get he's thinking about the time he could lift a woman during sex or whatever, and instead he's stuck in a wheelchair, and that's the whole drama. But I'm like, bro, you need to let go of the broom closet. Like, it gets brought up every single time you think about anything sex related. The broom closet needs to go.
It must have been a special experience.
A real good one, for sure.
It's quite a broom.
I feel like John should have notes on that because he got mad at him for like staring up into the sky and thinking about other stuff while he was,
But he was in the
with
moment.
Irene. So he's doing it again here.
God,
He's just like daydreaming
Of another
mid-makeout.
woman. Yeah.
Okay, so this was me actively changing my mind about whether or not I would have preferred to read this before Tower of Dawn. In Chaol's POV, toward the end of this chapter, it says he didn't really see the point in bothering to fall in love with the world, not when it could be taken from him, not with so many dangers waiting to rip them apart. And I think reading this before Tower of Dawn, all in all, like the chapter as a whole and just all of his conversations with Nezrin probably would have been like a giant cringe eye roll. But reading it right after finishing the book is like almost kind of heartwarming in a way, just because his character has developed so much since this moment where he's like not really super interested in living. And at the beginning of Tower of Dawn, he almost wanted them to just say they couldn't heal him. But yeah, just so much has changed. And then coming from him finding so much joy and love in life and with Irene, even without being permanently healed, has just been like such a huge character arc like over the course of the book. So at least like getting this little glimpse back into kind of how he was thinking going into it was kind of, I don't know, it was a little different reading it at the end.
To take a turn from that, I am so mad that she wrote that she wrote in this little like heated moment between them. Like, seriously? And they didn't even finish. Of course they didn't with Chaol. Like, I'm so done.
I did think the makeout was weird.
It was so weird. And I just like
But that's so Chaol and Nezrin. That's been their
Yeah.
whole relationship.
That's so true.
thinking of this now, I'm definitely on board with Kyle of like, why read this after? Like, I wouldn't be so upset about reading this if I'd have read it before the book. And it would have set it up better for their whole weirdness in the first half of the book.
That's true.
Instead of knowing how it ends and then going back and you're like, this is so dumb. Like,
Because we do get,
and
like, one of them talks about how they, you know, she sat on top of him or something and they tried to have a moment and stuff.
Yeah.
And now we actually get to see that moment.
yes. Oh my gosh, yes. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, she does reference it.
And I wrote in my notes, I said, Sarah Janet should never have written this garbage. But like, she wrote it before, like, it makes sense to her because she wrote it before writing Tower of Dawn. But we're reading it after the fact.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense. It's not right. So I'm totally on board with Kyle with reading these types of things
Oh my gosh.
beforehand.
But if you were like a person who was reading these as they came out, right?
Yeah.
And so it's at the end of a special edition of Empire of Storms. And so it's like just a scrap of something to make you last to the next book. And that makes sense. And obviously we read it out of order and that just is what it is. But I feel like that would make sense for if you were reading it in, what would this come out? 2015, 2016, something around there?
Yeah,
that would
publication
make sense.
order.
So,
Yeah, because then at the end of Tower of Dawn, which came out next, they do the whole epilogue as Aelin's POV because it's setting it back up for Kingdom of Ash to start. So I guess that makes sense. Like at the time, releasing it with Empire of Storms to like set it up.
This one makes a little bit more sense too because it is the first chapter of the next book, or like it's a preview of the very beginning, you know.
Yeah.
So, but still, I mean, if you're going to release bonus chapters, at least say when you should read them if you're reading like in the timeline.
Kyle and I were talking literally right before we recorded this that he was like, at least the second chapter mattered. And I was like, really? You think the one with Chaol and Nezrin mattered over the one with the other group? Only because this one, we already know the resolution to. Like this chapter, we just read it and got a little tiny bit. The other one at least gives some hope of a new character with this magic water wielder person and maybe her coming back and like a little something that could be a hope on the side or a person on the side type of a thing. This one, we already know how it ends. So
to me, the first one was like, it was like one of the other bonus chapters we read where he had other friends come by and eat dinner or whatever. And then like later in a book, it was referenced and we were like, yeah. Like, I don't think anything from that chapter was just like, by the way, Rowan has cousins. And then she realized, oh, I don't need a whole chapter to say that. I can just say he has cousins and people will believe me. And she took it out.
In this fantasy world that I've created.
Your story. If I'm reading the book and you're like, oh, Rowan had a cousin on another ship, I'm like, whoa, hold up. You never said he had wait a minute.
But what if Phaedra comes back? And then we'll be like, oh, the girl from the little village.
What if she does? I mean, she's a little girl with like cool water butterfly powers.
That's the whole point.
Then I will have no. I will have no.
They do reference
her,
that
guess.
bonus chapter in Empire of Storms, but it is very brief. It's just like chapter 2, where Aedion mentions like a little girl they met in a village or something.
Well, and I remember that because we were like, oh, that's so early. We could have read that bonus chapter. Oh well, and then spent the next 8 episodes or whatever we did in the tandem read. So I remember that.
Yeah, because it's easier to write that. Where it's like, hey, remember that girl we met? Yep.
Oh my god!
I have cousins.
I never want to
boat.
read any of your bonus chapters in a book you write, Kyle.
I wouldn't have bonus chapters. Everything in my book would be needed and necessary, and I wouldn't cut out that stuff because it would never be there.
Oh my gosh! Well.
And on that happy note, that's it for this bonus episode. Join us next week for our regularly scheduled episodes as we dive into Kingdom of Ash. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, I don't know why.
I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, that was some great creative freedom there.
You committed to it, so.
You did. Yeah, that was really impressive.
Yeah. Thanks. We'll be starting with chapters 1 to 13 and can't wait to discuss them with you in the meantime. Check out our website at betweenpagesandfriends.com for sweet merch, links, and our monthly newsletter sign up.
As always, stay wordy, stay nerdy, don't stress, and stay blessed.
Stay blessed, fam.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
See ya.